Good evening, everyone. I say good evening advisedly. For those of us on the west coast of North America, it is, of course, the late afternoon and a while yet before the sun goes down. But to those of you in the east, it's definitely evening. And either way, a hearty welcome to all of you for joining us for today's webinar, let me put it that way, with Christine Boyer and Jeff Chandler. I'm delighted you've able to join us. You're in for a real treat. We did a practice session just a few days ago, and Jeff and Christine are terrific presenters. Just to give you a sense of where we're going for the next 60 minutes, Jeff will be our first presenter, and then I'll introduce Christine, who will, and the two of them together will, their presentation will last, including some video clips, close to 30 minutes. At that point, we'll throw it open to you for questions, and we'll spend at least 25-30 minutes taking those questions. But you don't have to wait until the question period, the official question period, to ask questions of them or of me. And the place to make comments or ask questions or to alert me that you're having technical difficulties is in the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And below the chat box is a blank horizontal box into which anything you type and then hit enter will be propelled up into the chat box for everyone to see. And I, of course, will be monitoring it much more than Christine and Jeff will, and we'll make sure that any questions that you pose that you think of, feel free to type them in for all of us to see, and I'll make sure that those get relayed to Jeff and Christine when the right time comes. Let me say, as many of you know, this is a Green Teacher webinar, and if you're not familiar with our nonprofit magazine and books, let me just say that Green Teacher is, we've been publishing for over 20 years some of the most innovative ideas for how to educate kids about a wide variety of environmental topics. In the last 10 years, we've had the opportunity to do a number of books, including our newest one, related to this series of webinars called Teaching About Invasive Species. And Jeff, if you can advance the slide, that would be great. And that book is in the upper left-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner is the first of a series of ebooks, very small, inexpensive ebooks that we've published that are very targeted collections of thematic collections for those of you who are working with kids inside and outside schools. And I mention all of this about Green Teacher simply to say, if you are not yet a subscriber or you're not haven't purchased any of our nonprofit books, I'd strongly encourage you to do so. And by doing so, you'll enable us to continue to have the resources to put on this series of free webinars. As you heard from the get-go, when Jeff activated the recording button, this session is being recorded, so don't feel you need to take many notes. You will have an opportunity, as will any of your friends, that you alert after the session, if you find it worthwhile, that indeed you can view the archive version anytime, and so can they, freely for the next 30 days. After that, it does disappear into a subscriber-only access part of our website. Okay, without further ado, let me, and we will, by the way, send out an email with all those details about how to access the archive version. That'll go out sometime tomorrow. Let me introduce Jeff Chandler. Jeff works for the National Environmental Education Foundation in Washington, D.C. They are the organization that puts on the wonderful kind of co-sponsors, or sponsors rather, EEWeek.org, and they are co-sponsoring this webinar with us. We've had the pleasure of co-sponsoring a couple of webinars together now over the last couple of years, and it's been a delight working with Jeff. He's the Education Program Associate for the Foundation, I'm going to, Jeff, a warm welcome, and I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, great. So hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you Tim and Green Teacher for inviting us to co-host this webinar with you on such a fun and important topic in environmental education. Since we are talking about citizen science and the idea of gathering input from many different people, it would be great to make this an interactive discussion by hearing from all of you right off the bat in the chat feature in the bottom left. So why don't we start by just having everyone type in where they're located right now and any involvement you've had with citizen science or invasive species. Can be related to a school, doesn't have to be. And we'll just get those ideas coming in, see where people are coming from. All right, Venice, California, Colorado, great. Yeah, awesome. All right, we'll keep that going and I'll keep moving through my slides here. So for anyone unfamiliar with National Environmental Education Week, or EE Week, it takes place each spring around Earth Day, this year from April 19th to 25th. And sponsored by Samsung, EE Week celebrates environmental education and stewardship among K-12 students and really strives to be that focal point for the reminder that environmental education really can and should be engaged in year-round. So it can focus on a week, but really it's year-round applicable. For several years now, we've been working around the theme of greening STEM, showcasing how the environment provides a great context for looking at so many other subjects and how it can be incorporated in so many different ways. Environmental education certainly doesn't have any geographic constraints, so we encourage everyone to get involved and show your support by registering for free to be a part of EE Week this year, no matter where you're tuning in from. EE Week is an initiative of the National Environmental Education Foundation, or NEEF, specializing in connecting formal and informal K-12 educators with environmental knowledge. But NEEF also reaches the public through a couple of other areas, such as healthcare providers, public land managers, broadcast meteorologists, and others. So I'll show how we're able to connect a wide range of people to invasive species through citizen science in some of these different areas. But first, here's a short list of some of the things available if you register for EE Week. You'll have access to educational materials such as activity guides, toolkits of lesson plans, and resources collected from other environmental organizations. Stories of EE Week events taking place in blog and news posts from experienced educators on best practices and shared resources. Just recently, we had one from Tim and Green Teacher leading up to this webinar about the great string of webinars they've got planned around invasive species. And hopefully we'll get one up from Christine also, and then it'll keep going, so stay tuned. There's also professional development opportunities like this one, contests, giveaways, funding opportunities, plenty of other things. So we urge everyone to register and enjoy the celebration of environmental education. But tonight we are going to focus on the piece of all that is citizen science, and specifically how it relates to invasive species awareness and removal. And so in a few cases, that will be effectively incorporated into an educational curriculum, and then in some cases it's just open to the general public to get involved, because really it's for everyone. So let's see. Citizen science works so well in a school setting because many of these projects can be joined from wherever you're located, online or just by submitting data from your local region. So it's really a perfect platform for environmental education involvement. These projects can give the learning a sense of purpose and bring real-life connections to the material. They can also just be a lot of fun to participate in, so students really enjoy being a part of a larger project like one of these citizen science projects. So informal learning opportunities such as a zoo, aquarium, museum, or nature center can provide citizen science possibilities to get involved with, such as this Asian carp exploration curriculum available through the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, where students learn about invasive carp species and their effects on the Great Lakes waterways, and then work to design solutions to the problem that then get reviewed and analyzed by scientists at Shed. So schools participated in this curriculum as part of EE Week last year, and were able to make connections to different subject areas of the curriculum. Public lands also provide great opportunities for getting students involved in citizen science and invasive species. For instance, at Badlands National Park, park officials visit schools to talk about identifying common prairie plants and animals, and students learn to differentiate between native and invasive species. Then they visit the park with their school on a field trip and bring field journals to identify plants and animals they've learned about in the class session, and then record their observations, helping catalog locations of invasive species within the park. Another opportunity for anyone to help out with invasive species control on public lands is through NEEF's Public Lands Every Day and National Public Lands Day events. These events are open to everyone and could take the form of a service event or educational session, learning about the local environment. In this photo from one of this fall's MPLD events in DC at Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, a volunteer is helping to identify and remove an invasive vine that added to a project that cleared over 1,000 cubic feet of invasive material. So it really does make a difference when you have all of these people contributing to a citizen science project or a volunteer invasive removal project like this. The park is continuing the project and is currently working with the District Department of the Environment and National Park Service to create a map or grid system of invasives in the park so that they can strategically assign certified volunteers to specific areas and record progress in terms of acreage and plant matter removed. So it's an ongoing project because it's been so successful. The last example I'll share tonight is a project called Eyes on Central Pennsylvania that we've been working on with Chief Meteorologist Joe Murgo, where citizens can submit photos of plants and wildlife they see in their region in central Pennsylvania and upload them to the Project NOAA mission featured here. There, Joe Murgo works with staff at NEAF and other spotters to help identify the species and put up blog posts and social media discussions about how some of these spottings are recording related to weather broadcasts, climate trends, and other environmental issues. So one of these blog posts is featured here about native plants and butterflies and what people can do in the region to plant local plants to support the wildlife. This can help alert the public to local invasive species issues and give them advice about how to help. The example shown here is the spotted lanternfly, which has been causing a problem in the state, and this blog post is asking people to identify the insects and its egg masses and report their locations with a photo to the project to help stop the spread. Some photos submitted even make it on air to Joe's live weather broadcasts, giving an added incentive for people to join in and get involved. It's a little local publicity and recognition. So hopefully this gave you an idea of the many ways schools and the public are able to engage in citizen science projects in the effort of tackling invasive species. And for more information on examples of how you can celebrate environmental education during EE Week this year and throughout the year, please visit eeweek.org and register. We will have an upcoming giveaway coming up soon for all registrants, so make sure you sign up soon to stay involved as we get closer. All right, thanks, and I'll hand it back over to Tim, I think, to introduce Christine.
That was terrific, and we will, the URL that you see on the screen here, we'll make sure that everyone who registered for today's webinar will have that sent to them tomorrow as well. Okay, without further ado, Christine, let me introduce you. And by the way, folks, Christine doesn't want me to tell you this, but she has a bad cold, so please bear with us or send her warm thoughts as she does her presentation. But Christine's terrific. She's a science education program manager for the Vital Signs program at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute in Portland, Maine. She supports educators through professional and curriculum development. She works with students and citizens on the ground and through the program's website, which she'll be talking about. And through the Vital Signs program, she gets really excited helping participants experience the fun, creativity, and critical importance of science. What else might I say about her? She wrote a wonderful, I met Christine initially when she responded to our call for submissions to the book that I mentioned earlier that we've just published called Teaching About Invasive Species. It was a fantastic article, and we've gotten to know each other, and she's now our regional editor for the state of Maine for Green Teacher. Christine, a warm welcome, and sorry to teach you a little bit about your cold, but I just thought if it's the least we could do to send warm thoughts your way.
I definitely appreciate it, and I apologize in advance for my nasally voice and any nose blowing or sneezing that people have to put up with. I did notice that there's a question about EE Week, Jess. I don't know if you see that in the chat box, and someone's wondering about if they could be a classroom teacher to be involved with EE Week. So I didn't know if that's something you want to.
Sure. Tim, do you want me to address that now or wait till the end? I guess until we hear from Tim, I can just say you don't have to be a classroom teacher. We've got people from local parks or zoos, aquariums, nature centers, just anyone who is able to influence student learning in environmental education and who is just interested in environmental education also. There's a lot of information that we feature that can just be for the general public to increase your own knowledge of environmental issues and local awareness. So a lot of these projects, we call for volunteers to come help out with invasive removal on public lands events, and so that could be for anyone. So yeah, definitely sign up. Good point,
Great,
Joshua. EE Week is everyone's week.
Okay, so as Tim mentioned, I manage a science education and citizen science program in Maine called Vital Signs. And I just wanted to, I know there are others joining us who are experiencing cold and snow, but I wanted to share this image from the daytime image from the window next to me. So that maybe that helps explain my cold a little bit. But so I did notice that we have folks from Vancouver and Oregon and Florida, which sounds nice to me right now. And I'm really excited to share with all of you from all the places that you are some of the work that we're doing here in Maine. And my goal is to share some ideas and resources that I think you can use and are useful to you in all of those places with your students or in your programs. Most of what I'm about to share with you is available in the book that Tim mentioned, Teaching About Invasive Species. Here's me and some coworkers excited to have received our copies. And it's 50s and warm there. Oh goodness, okay, distracting me. So my coworker Sarah Morrisa and I really captured the best practices that I'm going to share with you in that article, in that book, which is a great resource in general, beyond that article that I'm sharing. So Jeff introduced a number of citizen science projects a few minutes ago, and I'm hoping that I know a number of you have already shared some in the chat box. I saw that one person was at least familiar with iNaturalist, which I'm going to mention later. But if you'll continue to share in the chat box any citizen science efforts and platforms, local or global in scope, that you know about, I think that'll be really useful. And I wanted to say a little bit about citizen science generally. Citizen science is a growing field. There's a lot of growing interest and more projects arising every day. And there's a lot of, I think, excitement about what we can accomplish when people of all ages and backgrounds and knowledge levels are engaged in science research. It's a really exciting time. Some of the citizen science research efforts are driven by scientists and their research questions and their data needs, and others are driven by communities, community interests and needs, and some are driven by individual interests and curiosities. And I think some programs like Vital Signs and others really try to span the gamut and create space for all of those scientists, communities, and individual interest and curiosity. I keep trying to use the arrow key here. Some topics and research questions, like invasive species, are especially suited to citizen science efforts. In the case of invasive species, we know that species are moving or being moved all over the globe by human activity, climate change, natural range shifts, and some of those species will become invasive in those new places once they arrive. And we hear time and again from professional scientists and managers that early detection is key for successful mitigation and management of species. And early detection really relies on having informed and curious citizens who are working carefully as careful observers in their local habitats, and we know there just aren't enough scientists and managers to go around. So that really makes invasive species an area that's ripe for opportunity for students and citizens to participate. And for teachers, we know teachers are excited to engage in citizen science because it really offers this authentic, Jeff really alluded to this authentic opportunity for students to do science with real research questions and contribute data and information to real and timely research efforts. And it's also an opportunity for students of all ages to build their science skills, their interest in science, their interest in nature, to build connections with local professionals, and again, all while making really valuable contributions to invasive species detection and research. That was a quote from a teacher that we work with, who, for any teachers who are involved with next generation science standards and transitioning, we've just found citizen science is a great way to bring the practices into your classroom. So we find that citizen science experiences look different across grade levels, across classrooms, subject areas, location and ecosystems, the species being studied. But we also see that the underlying process that student scientists go through, making observations, collecting data, connecting, and contributing, those are similar. And we've seen some best practices emerge, or things that we think are best practices or helpful practices. And so I'm going to show you some of those. But I'm going to start off with one story from Maine, an example from Maine of a classroom of 8th graders who headed out to the river behind their school. So this is in Dedham, Maine, and it's Rhonda's 8th grade students who were in their 4th year of investigating their schoolyard habitats and contributing data to vital signs. And they decided to contribute data to Mission Rock Snot, which feels very appropriate to me right now, I have to say. But, I mean, who wouldn't want to help Mission Rock Snot? I'm not sure. So rock snot is an invasive diatom known to cover and smother freshwater stream habitat. It has not been seen in Maine yet, but it's one that scientists at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and really anyone who fishes is concerned about. And I have a quick clip to show you of these student scientists at work. So let's see if this will work for me. So I see that at least one person lost the sound. I'll just throw out there that the full version of that video is available on the homepage of the Vital Signs website. So you can check it out later. It always makes my day when I watch it. But it was just to give you a taste of their field work and what it looked like for them to be in the field on the hunt for this invasive species. And following their experience in the field, one student team called Team Equinox thought they had found rock snot. So they collected their written and photo evidence to support their claim that they found it. And once they were satisfied with their work, they had their classmates peer review and got some feedback, made some changes. Once they were felt that they had made a strong case to support what they knew was this very significant claim, finding this species in Maine. They published their observations on the Vital Signs website, where Paul Gregory, one of our species experts at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, got an email. He went and reviewed the observation, and he actually thought that their case looked strong enough that that he requested a sample of what they had found. Once he got the sample, he and a colleague looked at it under a microscope and determined that it was a close relative, but not the invasive rock snot. So he was able to leave a final comment to the students letting them know, and that was with great relief. But Rhonda and her students, as well as the scientists at the DEP, were all very excited about the experience, and they were so excited that they actually created that video that I showed you a small clip of to share with their community, with the Vital Signs community, and with their school board to show how they preferred to learn science by participating in real research efforts. So again, you can see the full video. It's pretty great on the homepage, on the Vital Signs homepage. The learning experience that Rhonda's students had, asking a question, doing fieldwork, supporting a claim with evidence, interacting with experts online, and creating media-rich projects can be replicated in your classroom, wherever it may be, and it highlights some of what we think enhance an invasive species citizen science experience. So keeping that experience in mind, I'm going to share some resources and best practices with you that you can implement in your classroom. So the first one is connecting with an online community or database. So if you're in Maine, you can connect with us here at Vital Signs, but there's lots of opportunities to connect with others, and connecting with an online database really gives the students learning real purpose and meaning beyond the classroom, an authentic audience, and there's lots of active citizen science groups, online naturalist communities, and species databases for you to connect with. So I have a couple examples. I know one of you is already at least using iNaturalist, so I did a quick search in iNaturalist in their projects for invasive species projects, and a number of them came up. So again, this is one place to look for research efforts to connect with in your area. You can also create your own project on iNaturalist and invite others to help you. Oh, I see that someone just downloaded the iNaturalist app. Very cool. Another place you can look is SciStarter.com. SciStarter has a bank of citizen science projects. You can do a search for invasive species, and that's what I did here, and a few of them that came up. Project NOAA that Jeff mentioned. There's a number of others, EdMaps, iSpot, Texas Invasives if you're in Texas, and citsci.org is another place that you can go to look. Okay, so the next practice that we think is important is to ask a question. So whatever platform, program, or community group you connect with, it's good to get your students thinking like scientists by building your investigation around a real research question. And I have some examples here of research questions guiding the Vital Signs community. This is our field missions page. You can see we have a range of habitats and species types. And we also have, you can look at the bottom there, the purple loosestrife spreading. That's a mission specific to a school that they've teed up that they're working on. So once you have your community that you're connecting with, you have your research question, now your students are really invested. They want to do good work. They know it's important. So we think it's really good to then practice fieldwork skills. Students really do need some practice to be able to be keen observers in the field. And I'm just seeing this question here about students who are too shy to work in a group. And that does make me think, I was just going to mention that it's a really great opportunity to hone in on skills that students might already have. So if you have a shy student, maybe they're really good at art or photography or writing or really good with computers, and maybe really giving them a specific role that they can use in the field or in the classroom to enhance the overall research project. You know, maybe they don't have to, maybe that'll help them really step up and feel comfortable being in a group once their expertise is acknowledged by the rest of the class. And in general, this is a really great chance to highlight some kids who don't seem interested in science. Once you learn that they're really great at art, you know, this great drawing here in the top middle of the collage. I was a student who was really disengaged in science, and when he posted his observation with that sketch, the feedback he got was amazing, and it really got him excited about science. So there's lots of ways and opportunities to get kids excited, and it's really interdisciplinary. That's something that can be harnessed. I keep waiting for like this example of the students who made the video. I think you could have a team of students who are maybe your documentary film crew who make the movie about what you do. And just through their interviews and observations and film editing, I think would have a really rich learning experience around the science, but they also get this really cool product to be proud of at the end that's a little bit different. So that might be another way to engage a group that's maybe a little bit less comfortable with the rest of the class. So another way to practice fieldwork before heading out in the field is to have students really investigate their species identification resources so that when they head out into the field, they have a better sense of what characteristics to look for. For those that were able to see the video and hear the video, those kids really had a good sense for the characteristics that differentiated rock snot from the moss and other things that they were looking for. It might also be an opportunity for them to create their own species identification resources, digging into that researching the species and generating a tool for themselves just would be a great starting point. The next best practice is making a claim. Scientific argument is a really important scientific practice. And in Vital Signs, we've structured species observations and data around students making a claim about whether or not they found the invasive species they were looking for, and then backing it up with evidence and reasoning. So whichever online platform you use with your students to share data, you can design your fieldwork data sheets to guide students through the process of making a claim and supporting it with evidence and reasoning. So here's an example of the Vital Signs data sheet, or a piece of the Vital Signs data sheet that calls out their claim and the evidence. And we've had teachers go from doing Vital Signs to using iNaturalist or Project NOAA and just continuing to have their students structure the data that they post or using a scientific argument framework. Next is peer review. We think that it's really important to have students engage in peer review, both as an integral part of science, but also as an important collaboration skill for them to develop. Giving and receiving feedback is hard, not just for kids, but I think for many of us. And we think that with tools and support and time, and again, this engaging and authentic context, it's a great opportunity for students to develop those skills. So I have here an example of our scientific argument peer review tool that supports students in reviewing one another's scientific arguments. Another tool that teachers use to scaffold giving and receiving feedback is this quality assurance checklist in the corner of the slide. And I actually have a short video showing students giving one another feedback using this quality assurance checklist. I'm going to show you that quick video. I think one of the things I really like about that video is that it shows that it is kind of awkward for kids to give each other feedback, but they're willing to do it, and I think they're partly willing to do it because they have some tools to help them decide what's useful feedback, and they have a context again that is really authentic, that they know the data and quality of data is important. I noticed in the chat box that there was a question about engaging managers and having them be excited about the data. And I think one response to that would be that if you connect with them and find out the species of highest priority to them and species that they think a novice can be most helpful with, that's a starting place. I also think making sure you collaborate with them around, we work closely with our scientists around our species identification resources so that we feel confident that they're going to help students make successful identifications. And they don't have to always be right, but when they do share them, the scientists feel that they're high quality and they've already been peer reviewed, they've gone through multiple iterations. So I think that's, that might help. Hopefully that helps answer your question. So lastly, we think it's really important to share your data. So again, this gets back to that question of if you've really engaged with your managers in this online community, it's important for students to get to share that work and get to actually interact online with other novices, with each other, with the experts. And having those online conversations is another opportunity for them to hone their scientific communication and scientific thinking skills. And it's really empowering. And I'll show you in a minute one more example of what that looks like. They can also share what they've learned on the ground in the community. These photos are from an invasive species forum that some students hosted here in Maine and brought over 100 community members in to learn about all sorts of invasive species. And I think they had a really fun time doing it. And they also engaged the community in signing up for citizen science efforts while they had them as a captive audience. So that was a really fun experience. And we get really excited when we see all of these experiences translate to the students continuing their invasive species research and their citizen science efforts beyond the classroom or program time. For some students, it just really is that engaging. They get hooked, and they keep looking, and they keep posting, and that for me is a dream come true. So it does happen. So our last piece of advice is to start small and evolve over time. We hear time and again from experienced teachers that it's best to start small and to make a commitment to learn and experiment together with your students as you explore local habitats, to generate questions of interest, to connect online, and to get excited about taking part in real research efforts. And you can evolve and deepen the way that you're engaging your students over time. You don't have to do everything the first time around. So my one last video is from a teacher who has done just that. He's evolved and deepened the way he participates over time. He's also going to share a little bit about how empowering it's been for him and his students.
Hi, Christine. It's Tim here. I'm not seeing it load. Is it loading at your end?
Yep, it is. Are others not seeing it? Oh, it's, you know what, all right, looks like people aren't seeing the video. I can share the link to it later. So if that sounds good. Oh, Diana says I had to click on it on my screen and it works. Tim, I think, I'm going a little over time anyway, so we'll share the link to this video if people are interested. How about that?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. So just quick wrap up. So our advice and best practices from the vital signs community here in Maine are to connect to an online community or database, ask a question, practice your fieldwork skills, make a claim, support it with evidence and reasoning, have your students peer review each other's work, give and receive feedback, and then to share your data and share your learning. And then for you and your sanity, start small and evolve over time and give yourself permission to learn and explore alongside your students. So those are our takeaways from here in Maine. I hope they're helpful, and I've really enjoyed reading some of your comments in the chat box, and I'm excited to start having a conversation.
Thanks, Christine, and thank you, Jeff, as well earlier for your wonderful presentation. And indeed, we will send out this list of resources that Christine's just brought up on the screen. Those will go out in an email tomorrow to everyone who registered. And indeed, I would also a shout out to Christine about your last video with the teacher who's participating in the Vital Signs program. It's a very articulate statement about how he's made use of it, use of the program, the citizen science program that you're running, and how it's really made his teaching and what happens in his classroom very dynamic and engaging for his students. So I would encourage everyone to check out that video when we send out the link to you tomorrow. And agree with you, Christine, it's been quite an engaging chat box. The two of you have provoked lots of good comments in the chat box, and I think it's also fair to say, as we saw when Jeff, you invited people to indicate where they're from and what involvement they already have in either citizen science or invasive species education, that we saw just a cascade of comments from all of you who are here with us tonight in this webinar are people who indeed have a considerable amount of experience in each of these topics, and some real veteran experienced educators with us this evening, so no surprise that that we've had a lot of you have been able to answer each other's questions. And so let's just proceed here. And Janet, I'm going to come to your question in a few minutes. I've written down a few of the first questions that have been posed. But to all of you, please take a moment if you've got questions, just as I see Rochelle Martin has just done, and pose a question in the chat box. I will pay attention to them. I will relay them to Jeff and Christine. So take a moment while you can and type them in, anything that comes to mind over the next several minutes. And while you're typing that question, let me just make a couple of announcements. I failed to say at the outset that in what is now about 15 minutes, we'll interrupt and I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of questions and we may want to run a little bit over. But what I will ask everyone's indulgence to do is in about 15 minutes, I'm going to put up an end of webinar survey and ask your indulgence to fill it out. It takes about 60 to 90 seconds to do so. And those of you that do indulge me in that exercise will in fact be eligible to win one of 2 free subscriptions to Green Teacher magazine. The other thing I was going to mention was, and I also failed to do so at the beginning, I did say that this is the first of 4 invasive species webinars. What I failed to say was that we are also, as a thanks to those of you who've joined us in this live session, any of you who decide that you're interested in picking up a copy of the book Teaching About Invasive Species, which with contributions from Christine and many educators from across Canada and the US, it's a $14.95 book, and those of you who purchase it online the next 24 hours will simply charge you $10. So anyways, that's the end of that. Let's move on to the questions. And I think the first question, and I'll let Jeff, or maybe we'll start kind of go back and forth, and of course if either of you want to add a further answer to what either of the other of you have done, that's fine. But I wanted, the first question that I saw posed here was, how do you engage shy, any suggestions for engaging shy students in citizen science projects? Do either of you want to take a stab at that?
Well, I think we had a couple good suggestions coming through the chat box, and I think Christine mentioned a couple, but the one I threw in there was there are a lot of citizen science projects that don't necessarily have to be group-based. So if you're looking for one to start with and you think you might have a lot of students in your class that wouldn't be as open to sharing data as a group, they can make individual submissions to a larger citizen science project. That might get them a little more used to being a part of a citizen science project. They might just start talking about what they're finding and what they're submitting outside of the project anyways, and then so moving into a more group-based project where they're going out and investigating a local land area or some species might be more familiar to them.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And maybe Christine, you can help us with this. I know that a few people have tried to address this question as well in the chat box, but the question was, does anyone do you have any recommendations for apps that, or other technology that can be used to assemble photos and videos while you're out in the field, say during a field trip, and you want to record evidence?
So I don't know of the perfect solution for that. That sounds to me like the sort of field notebook, some sort of perfect field notebook app. I'm on the lookout. You know, there are a number of sort of note-taking apps you can use. And maybe if it's okay, I'll see if I can distill a couple and maybe add them to the links of resources that we send out later. But I think that's really a good question. I don't feel like there's a great perfect tool that exists yet, especially when you're talking about wanting to include video and audio and all those recordings. You know, you might. I've tried Evernote. Yeah, I'll come up with a couple that I've tried. And for anyone who's going to NSTA in Chicago in a couple weeks, I'm excited about some of the sessions on field notebooks and science notebooks and using iPads in the field. So I'm planning to check out some of those. Maybe I'll run into some other folks there. So.
Thanks, Christine. I've got quite a few questions already in the chat box, so I'll try and deal with them not entirely randomly. But Rochelle, you asked the question, how suitable are invasive species removal efforts for young students? And I'm assuming by young students we're talking about those who are anywhere from sort of 8 to 12.
I could take a stab at this one, Tim. So I'd say it doesn't, an invasive species citizen science project doesn't always have to involve removal. So if you do an educational project, like I mentioned with the Badlands National Park, they can learn to identify them and distinguish them from other local similar species. And then maybe they go out and help identify it and mark it on a map, and then you can have another group of volunteers or people that might be better suited for actually sort of removing the invasive species come in and use their map points that they've plotted to take care of that situation.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Go ahead, Christine.
I was just going to add, we've had teachers, it is a good opportunity. For some species, you really need to use pesticides and you need to connect with boards and departments and things that do that. But we've seen great examples of older students working with younger students to do some removal, and I think those have been successful experiences and learning opportunities.
Christine, a question probably for you. Someone asked, and this was a question I kind of resonated with me. Most invasive species education is largely about plants, invasive plants, and not. You had a nice video clip of where they're looking for rock snot in the creeks in Maine. The question is, do you have examples of programs, or are there participants in Vital Signs that are working with marine invasives?
Yeah, there's a number of marine invasives. Marine invasives are hard, just the marine ecosystem is so much harder to contain anything, but there's a number of marine invasives, and many of them are in the intertidal, so they're accessible to students and even young students. So, in Maine we have green crab is a big one that's been in the news a lot, but one that there's rising concern about in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic is the Chinese mitten crab. Hasn't been found in Maine yet, but I know it's been found south of us. There's invasive algae. Yeah, there's a number of marine. For us, we have some schools that are right along the coast and they can walk out their door and be in the intertidal, and that's really lucky for them. It is hard, I know, for some teachers to get the funds to take field trips. So I think in some ways the upland plants become an accessible topic wherever you are. But I think there's cool opportunities to mix it with other, maybe plants aren't that exciting to all your students. I think it'd be so cool to do some studies of, for instance, insect biodiversity in plots with or without an invasive plant. And just put out some bug traps. And then maybe you have some kids who are into the plants and some kids who are into the bugs. You can do something similar, monitoring birds in different plots. So I think there's ways to integrate other fauna into the study, even if it is focused on invasive plants.
Mm-hmm. And I'd just like to add in too, so even if you're not located near a body of water where you might be able to get out and get involved in a local aquatic invasive citizen science project, the curriculum I shared earlier from Shed Aquarium in Chicago is online, and so students can use that from wherever they are and help develop a solution and understand the problem of the invasive Asian carp without necessarily being there. And it's less of a hands-on citizen science project, but they're still thinking about ways that they would deal with the problem.
Someone loves the bug trap idea. I'm so excited.
I wanted to go back to the previous question, and Mary Davis had a nice response in the chat box too, that about working with really young kids. And it is true. I'm not familiar with Japanese stiltgrass, but certainly garlic mustard sounds like it's similar in the sense that you have to kind of work at pulling it for several years to eradicate it, at least for a while, from a particular area. And that again is the sort of thing that one can engage young kids who are properly supervised and not trampling all the native plants in an area. But certainly I've worked with lots of educators in my part of the Great Lakes region that have successfully had young kids working with garlic mustard. And so thank you, Mary, for that suggestion. We had another question about, I've had a couple of questions sort of on the technical side from people wondering if they can, they came late. I know a lot of people had trouble getting in. I was answering a lot of emails as Jeff was doing his presentation at the outset, just to help people find alternate ways to get into this, access this presentation. So if you did miss it, again, we'll be sending out an email tomorrow announcing that the archive version is available. Feel free, if you're excited about this session, and to share that with any of your colleagues. Anyone can freely view this webinar for the next 30 days. And of course, if you're a Green Teacher subscriber, you can view it in perpetuity along with all the other 48 webinars that we've done over the last 5 years. And I was delighted to hear just the other day, I got a call from Long Island, a state park in Long Island, and said they're using the webinars. They're having professional development sessions on the last Friday of every month, and they choose which of the webinars to watch as part of their professional development for their staff. And I can imagine this will be one of those webinars that will be chosen quite soon. Okay, just looking to see lots more comments. Just looking to see if we've missed any other questions. Someone asked about citizen science links in Oregon. Jeff, is that something that they would find through that iNaturalist program you were referring to earlier?
They might, or SciStarter, I see has come up a couple times, and that's got a great collection. I don't know of any, just off the top of my head, specific to Oregon, but I'm sure there are. And so I can look into a little bit. We've got some EU Week educators out there that would probably know of local projects to get involved with. So I can circle back on that.
And Jeff, likewise with that same program, iNaturalist, is it, I think I asked you this when we were doing our practice session, but is it a program that welcomes or includes links to those outside of the United States, to Canada and other places?
I think so. I think, Christine, you might have more of a background using that program than I do.
It's global.
Great.
It's global. So I don't know how many projects there are internationally, but any participant can create a project as well.
Great. Good, good. Okay, let me just see if we've got any other questions. I think I've answered most of the ones that are there, but we're still welcome a few more. And as I say, in just a minute or so, I will. And by the way, yes, Amanda was asking the question earlier, really to you, Christine. I don't know if you saw it in the chat box, but is there a place where your citizen science work is posted? And I think you did tell us, indeed, that the vitalsignsme.org website that one can connect to the project. Is that?
Yep.
You can see some of these videos that we were watching earlier in the session.
Yep, they can see all the videos there, and our curriculum bank is available and free to use, and everything is just CC BY licensed. They can also share. So any educators, even if you're outside of Maine, if you want to participate in our educator community and share curriculum resources that you've created, that would be awesome. And I would love, any guest blog, if you like to blog and you want to do a guest blog. Actually, Jeff, we should do a blog on EE Week now that I think of it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to the one from Christine, and definitely check out the one from Green Teacher. That's the most recent one there at eeweek.org. That link will take you to it. And
Jeff, you're going to have some more videos in the run-up to EE Week in April?
We are. So we're going to have a couple other webinars They haven't been set in stone, but as soon as we know the dates for those will go up on EU Week, so you can go back and forth between the next Green Teacher webinars and the upcoming EU Week webinars.
That sounds great. Let me just take a moment now and see if I can bring us the can bring up the survey. There we go. And as I mentioned, folks, a few minutes ago, if you we'll put the survey up. If there are more questions to be asked, we'll stay a few minutes longer to answer your questions. But if you can indulge me as I asked for the next 60 seconds just to fill out these, several of them are just simply multiple choice questions, but to give us your feedback on this presentation, both in the content and also the technical aspects of the presentation, that would be very, very helpful to us. So you can just scroll down through that on your own and then hit enter at the end and or hit done, and this will provide feedback that I'll share with Jeff and Christine after the session, and help us improve forthcoming webinars. And as I mentioned, we have 3 more on invasive species education coming up over the next 8 weeks, so I hope you'll take a moment and sign up for those if indeed that's your interest, as opposed to okay. And Jeff and Christine, any additional comments?
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much for everyone who's been contributing in the chat box also. I think those comments are just as helpful as what was going on in the presentation, so thank you.
Yeah, just that it was really fun, and I agree with Jeff. I really, I felt bad because at times the chat box maybe was distracting me from some of my presentation, but I was just so excited to see what people were saying. So it's just a good group. Fun.
It was indeed a very rich chat box, and no huge surprise given the considerable experience of those of you who were signed up for this and participated in this evening's webinar. And a big thanks to all of you for doing just that. And I don't see any additional questions, so I think we're going to wrap it up in just a moment. And you can again, lots of thank you comments, Christine and Jeff, and I would like to heartily endorse those, and thank you for all the time that you put into the preparations, and a shout out to you, Christine. Hope you feel better soon, and it's really not much fun when you really just want to be in bed to have to get up and be in front of people on camera, but kudos to you for making the effort. And we had a good crowd tonight of I think about 65 people were on the live session at the peak. There were lots of people coming and going, and lots of people who had challenges to get in, but I know that they'll be sharing the news with their friends and colleagues, and because it was really a terrific tandem presentation. So thanks to both of you.
Definitely. Thanks for organizing this, Tim.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I will, by the way, copy the chat box before I sign off for the evening, but I will now hit the record button, so we'll officially end the webinar.